We're going to be doing the laced sleeves on this Stonepoint asymmetrical top. Let's get a little bit closer look, and if this will focus, there you go. We're going to make these sleeves. They're done vertically, and my camera won't focus. Okay, they're done vertically, and the picture to begin them are right here. First of all, we're going to be doing this mirror image of the scallop from the neckline, and then we're going to crochet out from the armhole and the scallop and build a sleeve that way. So let's get started. Okay, I'll show you the other sleeve. It's done, and the other sleeve is just attached with a slip stitch. We're going to be going back and forth down these rows all the way around. We're leaving this scallop part open, and we are just slip stitching to the armhole. So there's no sewing. It looks nice. It's very, very sturdy. This is not fragile. And then this is left open because this is where the lacing is going to go. And here's the bottom scallops. So it kind of makes a bit of a bell sleeve. It's a 3/4 sleeve, maybe a little bit longer, but the sleeves are the same for all of them. These are really fun to do, and let's get started. So I'm using an 8mm hook, which is what is used throughout this pattern. We're not changing hooks this time. Okay, I just did a knot here to attach my yarn. Now let's talk about where we're at. Okay, this is the neckline. So we're going to go into the same hole, and see, these are used stitches, and don't worry, we're just going to be crocheting over this and bring this little bit in. And it says to skip 2 stitches and go either side. I'm left-handed, so I'm going to go this side. You skip 2 stitches and attach your yarn I attach it with a knot. And the reason for that is it'll lay nicer, and then just pull up a loop. So that's all we're doing. We're not doing, if you do other types of attachments, it'll be a little bulky here. So just do this one. I know it's elementary and simple, but trust me, it's worth it. So then we're going to yarn over, and we're going to double crochet, but we're going to go into the same hole that the other scallops in. Okay, this is where we joined our shoulder. We single crocheted around, and when we did, we pulled up a loop from one side of the shoulder, pulled up a loop from another, and it's a single crochet decrease technically, and we're going into that exact stitch where it was decreased. So let's see, let's give you a good one. Okay, see, we're going right in there, and don't worry about these other 3 strands. Don't worry about them at all. Just make a really nice tight double crochet. We're doing 3 double crochets in here, and I'll show you. I'll just crochet it fast and show you what we're doing. Okay, and if you made a different choice on which 2 stitches you skipped, don't worry about it. It will be fine either way. I've done it both ways. So we have 3 double crochets in the same shoulder join as the other one, as the neckline. And see, this is a U stitch right here, so I'm going to skip these 2, and I'm going to slip stitch into the next 3 stitches. See, we started over at this side. This makes a little bit of a V here. We start over this side, we're working over there, and we're just going to be working back and forth. So I'm going to slip stitch to attach it. Then I've got to move up 2 stitches and slip stitch and slip stitch. So there we are. So I slip stitch to attach it, then went up 2. Now I'm going to turn it over, so we're moving back and forth, remember? And I'm going to do 3 double crochets with a chain 1 between them all except for the first one. So double crochet, chain 1, double crochet in the next stitch of the 3 double crochets. See? I'll show you. I'll do it and then show you. And then double crochet in the next one. And just make sure, look at this very last one. See, this looks kind of funky. It rolls over and looks like that. You didn't do anything wrong. You just roll it back. it's fine. Here's your strand. It'll be fine. But this is this is the stitch you want to go into, this one right here. So just make sure you get that stitch. It does need to be, some things won't matter on this. I'll tell you what things do matter. Now see, I made a mistake and I didn't chain one in between the double crochets. Now, but you don't chain one on the very last double crochet. So you end up with 3 double crochets and 2 chain one spaces. Now, this is a used stitch. We're going to move up. We're going to skip one unused stitch right here. We're going to skip this one, and we're going to slip stitch into this one. Now this time we're only going to slip stitch up one because we're single crocheting and we only need to move up one. Anyhow, that's why. So now we have 2 chain one spaces here. Let's look at this. 3 double crochets, and then we have 2 chain one spaces. We're going to put 3 single crochets into each of these spaces and work our way across the other side. So we're just going back and forth making a scallop. If you notice the other scallops, or if you haven't done them yet, these start with a foundation. First layer is 3 double crochets. The sleeves will have a foundation of 5 double crochets. The bottom trim has a foundation of 7 double crochets as the beginning layer. This is just, I try and think of this as layered like a cake. So we have 3 layers to this. And so this is a used stitch. Can you see? It's used. And we just go to the very next one. We're not skipping anything, and we're going to slip stitch. And we're ready. We're ready to start crocheting. Start crocheting out this way. And then we're going to single crochet and build rows and attach them all the way down here. And we're going to work, see if you can see this. Okay, we're leaving this alone. We're going to single crochet in the front loops all the way down, and then go around. We're going to build the sleeve around and stop right here. So just chain 36. Just begin to chain 36 right here. We don't do anything. We don't go anywhere. There's not a missing instruction there. I really do want you to just continue to just chain out from where we ended. We didn't do anything. We just are chaining. So chain 36. I'll meet you there. Okay, I've chained 36. Don't worry about the twisting or anything of this chain. It won't matter. And I'm going to go to the front loop of the second chain from the hook. Here's the first chain, here's the second chain. I'm going to single crochet in the front loop. Now I need to count my stitches. And this first turning chain counts as 1. So you need to count your stitches, a single crochet in the front loop all the way down. Don't worry if this is twisted, you'll untwist it as you go. And it can lay either way that you want it to. So single crochet in the front loop, down, back down your chain, and count your stitches. You should be at 35, and I will meet you there. Okay, here I am. I counted my stitches. I'm at stitch 35. So let's get this in frame. See, we chained, and now we're moving back down the chain, and now it says to go away from the next stitch. You're going to work in the next stitch away from your scallop. So here's where we began to chain away from our scallop. Here's my 34th stitch. This will be my 35th. And I will, don't forget to work in the front loop of that one. And then here's my next stitch away from the scallops. We're not doing anything to the scallops. Here's my next stitch, and I slip stitch and attach it to that. And then we've got to move up one for the single crochet. So we've got to move over one. I'll say over because up might indicate that we're at the shoulder, and we're not towards the shoulder. We're going towards the armpit. So let's get this in frame. Here's the armpit. It's hard to get it all in frame. But here's where we're moving away. I'm gonna get a different camera angle and meet you back. Okay, I just moved the camera out a little bit so you could see. This is the armpit of the garment right here. This is the opening. We're moving away. We just came back for our first, this was row 1, this was our chain, and then we came back for row 1, so this would be row 2. I slip stitched and attached that row to the next stitch, and then now I've got to move up one, so I have to slip stitch one more. I'll get the slip stitch one more, turn my work over, and I'm going to work back this way. I had to count my stitches the entire time. Now this slip stitch does not count as a stitch. So so this would be the first stitch to go into, and you would just front loop, single crochet into your very first stitch and count them. 1, and if you like gained or lost stitches, just count them, and you can kind of maybe ignore this turning chain when you get down to here, but it should be an exact count. And I had to count the entire sleeves. They work up quickly, but it was too easy for me to mess up. So 1, 2, and see, just make sure you don't count that slip stitch right there. Just make sure. I'll get a closer camera view. And front loop, single crochet all the way down your chain to the end. Make sure you count your stitches. I'll meet you there. Okay, here I am down at the end of my chain, and this is my 34th stitch. So don't worry if you need to go into this turning chain, or you need to ignore it. I need to ignore it, but in the very end of this, instead of in the front loop, I want you to go in both loops, but I need you to kind of look and make sure you get those loops exactly right. Okay, you can ignore this one if you end up with one extra stitch like I did. But go in here, make sure you turn it over, you really look for this stitch, see, and don't just do it anywhere. Now this is going to go in both loops to keep it sturdy down at the towards the wrist. So you're always going to go in both loops when you get down to the wrist. You're going to chain 1, you're going to turn, that counts as your first stitch. Now this is okay that you ignore this turning stitch to get the right stitch count. It's fine, that happens. So we're going to single crochet in the front loops back up towards the armpit. Count your stitches, and I will meet you at your 34th stitch towards the armhole. Okay, now I'm on my 34th stitch towards the armhole. So this is down, this is the wrist, towards the wrist, and this is towards the armhole that we made. And I'm at 34th stitch, and this kind of looks a little weird, but this is the armhole stitch that we slip stitched into, and this is my 35th stitch right here. So front loop, single crochet in that, and then we're going to attach it, but not at this stitch. This is a used stitch. The next unworked stitch, we're going to slip stitch, into the armhole. This is, when I say armhole, here's what I mean. This is the armhole on the garment. This is towards the wrist. So we're going to just make sure you go into the very next one. Okay, so you're going to slip stitch into the very next unworked stitch. We're building towards the armpit. Then you're going to slip stitch a second time into the next stitch towards the armpit, and then you're going to turn, and you're ready to work back down towards the wrist. So when you turn over, you need to look and see where your first stitch is. Now see, this is where you may end up gaining stitches. You can fix it down at the bottom, but it's best if you don't this is not a place, there's no more adjustments you can make after this. So this needs to be the correct stitch count. But where you might have trouble is, look, it almost looks like the first stitch you should go into is this one, but it's not. These are our 2 slip stitches. So this would be your first stitch that you can go into. So don't get confused. See, these are slip stitches right here. So it's actually looks like it actually will kind of look like it's the 3rd stitch from your hook. And this is why it looks like that. Let me see if I can let you. Okay, see how it looks like it's a 3rd stitch from your hook? This is the stitch we need to go into, but these are just the 2 slip stitches. And here's our very first stitch. So you can make a little bit of adjustment at the bottom, but hopefully, I mean, really don't. You should get this right. It's not too hard. And the great part about this amazing sleeve is you can lace it up. And this is a sleeve, as all my sleeves are interchangeable for any top. So you can go through and pick and put whatever sleeve you want on any of my tops. So this just gives you another tool, another sleeve in your wheelhouse, because we've got a cutout sleeve, we've got a cold shoulder sleeve, we've got a sleeve with shells, we've got a bell sleeve. It just gives you so many things you can do. Okay, so we're going into our first stitch, and we're going to front loop, when it says front loop single crochet, down towards the wrist. The wrist is this end right here. So I will meet you on the 34th stitch down at the wrist. Okay, I'm at my 34th stitch, and we need to make this nice and neat down here, but we need to go into both loops. So this is going to be a little tricky because a turning chain my turning chains always tend to collapse on me. I'll show you what you can do about that, but look over here. And my turning chain is actually, I'll see if I can pull it up for you. Sometimes I hang on to it when I turn it, so I have it there at the end. Some people put Brenda probably puts a stitch marker here. So let's do that so you can see where I have things. So this is my turning chain, and we found it, and here would be my stitch marker. Here's a stitch marker that I can just crochet into and leave it. Okay, so if you're having problems with this, because we need this to be nice and neat, this is where we go into both loops. This is my 34th stitch. So I'm going to go into both loops, but see how it took me a little bit to find it, and I'll show you what you can do about that. So I'm going to go into both loops. I didn't do a great job with my turning chain, and I'm going to do a single crochet, and then I'm going to chain 1. So remember, this will be our first stitch when I turn it. So see how it gets, I'm turning it over, and see how it gets kind of collapsed. If you have any, and see it's right there now, so if you have any problems, you can always just put this right here, so you know where to go to at the end. Or just to be more efficient, because this is a bummer if you have to pull it out. This builds very quickly, but it's just frustrating to have something so simple seem so hard. So this is stitch 1, and then we're going to front loop single crochet. This would be our second stitch. See, that kind of keeps it from collapsing. So it's just an idea. I know everybody has their own techniques, but I've had to rip out part of this sleeve before, and it's not fun, and it goes fast, but this is the point where I get a little anxious and want things to be done. So anyways, this is 1 stitch, oops, 1 stitch is my turning stitch, 2 stitches, and 3 stitches. And I will meet you at the armhole at the 34th stitch. Okay, I'm in my 34th stitch. I worked from the wrist back down to the armhole. Now notice that, if I can get away far enough, notice that here's the shoulder scallop. I am building away from the shoulder scallop. Okay, nothing goes over this or towards this. I'm building away from it towards the armpit, and then I'm going to keep going and go all the way around back up the other side, and I'm going to stop at this row right here. But let's go over this again so no one gets confused. All right, here we are. I'm at my 34th stitch, and counting will really help. Or when you do two slip stitches and you could put a marker in it, I didn't find that that helped me. My 34th stitch, so that means my 35th stitch is right, let me get this to focus, I don't know why it won't, is right here. There we go, a little bit. Okay, I'm turning it, so it's right here. And just front loop single crochet into my 35th stitch. Now this stitch has already been slip stitched into, so you got to go to the next one, slip stitch this. So you're just connecting this row to this, then you're moving up one stitch to move back down. So we get to slip stitch up the next unworked stitch, turn it over, and here we're going to talk about finding our very first stitch. Now this isn't the first stitch, this isn't the first stitch, these are the two slip stitches. This is our first stitch right here. So when you do that 35th stitch, if you need to, you could do your 35th stitch and you could just put a marker there, if that helps you. So I'm going to work with markers a little bit. We'll do a few more. So you just need to go in the front loop of that, sorry. And that's stitch 1. And see there's a marker right there. And this is 2, 3, and I'll meet you back down at the wrist. Okay, this is my 34th stitch. And remember I marked that turning chain stitch so I could go into both loops. This is where we single crochet into both loops. It's already marked for us. And then we chain 1, and this is where we want to put and turn, and this is where we put our marker from before into this chain 1 and single crochet into and single crochet back down towards the armpit. But I'm going to go ahead so this doesn't collapse, and I'm going to go ahead and put the marker there. Sometimes I just hold it and keep it from collapsing, whatever you got to do. So this is 2 stitches and 3, and I'll meet you at the 34th stitch. We're going towards the armpit. Okay, I'm at stitch 34 going towards the armpit. Like I said, I can't give you a row count because everybody's armhole opening size is different. There's a chart in the pattern, but you know, mine is like, I count down 20 stitches, so mine is like 40, 41, so it'd be 40, but we're not going into this. So the row count is different. You just have to keep going around. Now again, let's look at these stitches. I'm trying to give a good look. This is 34. So we know that this has got to be the 35th stitch. Turn it over, take a good look at it. So I'm gonna front loop single crochet in the 35th, 35th stitch. Remember, this stitch is used. This is where we worked a slip stitch into. So this would be our next unworked stitch towards the armpit, right here. So you slip stitch into that one, and then the next one also. Now when using these bigger hooks and this cotton yarn, I kind of pull right before, I notice, to keep it a little more taut. I kind of pull right when I put my hook through. I didn't realize I did that. Now remember, we've got these 2 stitches from the hook, but these are not, these are just the slip stitches. So it's technically, it would be the 3rd stitch from the hook would be your 1st stitch right here. And sometimes you may, if you get the stitch count wrong, you just pull out one row and probably your mistake is here. It's probably at the armhole probably not here. But we need this to stay nice and neat because we're going to be working in the round next time, and we're going to be putting double crochets here at the end so that it has a lot of stretch and flows nicely. So here we've already got them in. We already slip stitched 2 times, and here is our very first stitch. Here's our very first stitch, and we're going to front loop single crochet.